All right, yesterday we shared an update on a PDC complaint that was filed against Let's Go Washington back on May the 12th. The update is because the Public Disclosure Commission is moving into its next phase. They held a hearing last week in the case, which is routine after 90 days. If they think that there's potentially any merit to the complaint filed, they move ahead, they hold a hearing, and that's what happened last week. There were some TV stations that ran with it as if it was a new complaint, and that didn't go over very well with Let's Go Washington or Undivided podcast uh, producer Brandi Kruse. And they were concerned basically the TV stations that ran with the story didn't even reach out to them for comment. They are at the center of this complaint filed by Pam Stewart. Again, she's a Sammamish City Council member, and she's been a pretty vocal critic of Let's Go Washington's initiative. In fact, we shared in yesterday's episode that she was accused of sort of getting in the way of some folks who wanted to sign petitions for the income tax repeal, I 645. That happened back in late May at a Safeway store in Sammamish. So we talked about that today, but her complaint is basically contending that every time Brandi Kruse on her podcast talks about the Let's Go Washington initiatives, and in this case, we are talking about the parental rights initiative to restore parental rights in education. So the school has to tell you if something's going on with your kid, and the protection of girls in sports, keeping trans identifying athletes out of girls' sports. Those two initiatives Brandy's very passionate about and has spent a lot of time on her show, if you follow her, talking about those. So the complaint from Pam Stewart alleges that there have been at least 150 instances where Brandi has talked about these initiatives on her show, and that should be treated as an in-kind contribution to Let's Go Washington, basically an advertisement for those initiatives. So I didn't get a hold of Pam Stewart yesterday, but she did phone me back this morning. So I've updated my article published yesterday on the site to include some of her comments. But I wanted to share with you a little bit about what she said and a couple of the quotes from our conversation. We'll put this up for you. She said, the main goal here is transparency, right? I think in today's world, it's really important for people to know who's providing services, who's paying for things, so that they understand the information that they're getting and what that source is. Is it truly unbiased? Is it, a personal opinion? Is it a fact? To me, that's really important in today's world. And I think that's what we're all looking for, is just some transparency. So she mentioned that. And then she shared that she's also convinced Brandi Kruse is actively campaigning for Let's Go Washington. And she said, I Brady's way more involved than she should be. She says it isn't like she just had one episode where she talked about an issue. She's participated and been the MC at Let's Go Washington events. She's using her following and her followers in that way. She's pretty actively campaigning for these initiatives, and that seems pretty obvious given the number of times she brings it up. Again, that was in my conversation this morning with Pam Stewart, the Sammamish City Council member who filed the PDC complaint alleging that Let's Go Washington is either funding Brandi's campaign, which both she says they aren't and they contend they aren't. But she also took issue in our conversation with a post that Brandi put up yesterday. Of course, this has been heavily in the news since late last week. And the post from Brandi on X yesterday, we're going to share with you in a moment. Again, she was responding to the PDC investigation and repercussions. She says if they end up finding that her talking about the initiatives amounts to an in-kind contributions, that really is going to open up a Pandora's box here. If this ends up being a successful complaint, that there would be far-reaching impacts for members of the media all across this state.
And if suspicion is enough, the PDC has the power of subpoenas. They can subpoena my records, my personal information, my financials, based off of what? A hunch? A suspicion? Okay, if you say that suspicion is enough to get news entities to open up their books, well, I suspect that the Seattle Times, since it takes advertising revenue from the Washington Education Association, that advertising revenue is actually being used to pay them for favorable reporting. I suspect it. Bring them in, subpoena them, make the Seattle Times open their books. And we'll do the same thing to every single commercial advertiser working in the news sphere. And it will cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours in attorney fees, and it will render the PDC essentially useless. Try me. Try me. I will spend every waking hour I have burying the PDC in absolute bullshit over this. And Pam Stewart, in the Washingtonians for Ethical Government, Pam, you are on a razor-thin line of defamation. Razor thin. For one, you take one freaking step over that line of accusing me, again, of doing something that I have not done, taking money I have not accepted, getting handed money behind the scenes, to what, say men aren't women? Men aren't women, men aren't women, men aren't women, men aren't women. So we will raise holy hell in this state. We will bury every newsroom in PDC complaints, in legal work, if this is the route they choose to go. And I will be tireless in my pursuit of retribution.
So there is that. Pam Stewart said she took offense to that post from Brandi and likened it to a personal threat against her. So much more to come, I'm sure, on that. And there's no idea at this point when this will be resolved, by the way. The PDC indicated to me yesterday there's no timeline for resolution here. And resolution could look a number of different ways. It isn't necessarily going to be a fine if they find any in-kind contribution in favor of the person who filed the complaint. Or they could simply say to Let's Go Washington, okay, you can't do this, or Brandi, you can or can't do this. There could be a number of different courses if, in fact, they find the complaint to have some validity. But I want to remind you that there was a case concerning KVI radio hosts, um, both John Carlson and Kirby Wilbur, in this 2007 case. And in full disclosure, I worked for KVI at the time. I recall a lot going on when this case went to the state Supreme Court, and it was called, I want to read this, San Juan County versus No New Gas Tax. And this was a complaint that basically said these talk radio hosts are going on and on talking about the No New Gas Tax initiative. They should not be able to do this. They're campaigning for it. And the Supreme Court found that it was legally protected speech for these talk show hosts, ruling that it didn't violate state campaign finance laws, or that disclosures needed to be filed with the Public Disclosure Commission every time they talked about them. So it's almost as if this has already been decided by our state Supreme Court. Pam Stewart said she believes it's a different world now. And granted, the social media influence nearly 20 years later, and how podcasters are influencing news content that people absorb, it's a whole different landscape. So we'll see if the PDC takes that previous Supreme Court ruling into consideration or not, if they consider it to be something entirely different.